Hi y'all, my name is Kathy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the young adult librarian at Library 21C in the Pikes Peak Library District. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make yarn ball decorations like these ones using a balloon. Okay, so I'm here by my microwave. This goes best if you can hang the balloon off of something while you're working on it. The website where I found this recommended hanging it off of the handles on your kitchen cabinets, but my kitchen cabinets have no handles, so microwave handle instead. I've got my balloon here filled about halfway full. I have about 20 pieces of yarn, which are about 36 inches long. I have a little bowl, my white glue, and a fork. And you do want a bowl that at least has sort of a smallish base so that the glue can get high enough to coat the yarn with the glue well. If your bowl is larger, the glue will be lying flatter because it has more surface area to spread out in, and then it's harder to coat the threads of yarn evenly with the glue when it's all spread out. Easier when it's all clumped together in a smaller area. So to start, I just have one small piece of thread here, yarn, which I'll tie one end. I'll tie one end to start around my handle. And then I'll tie the other end around the balloon here and make sure it's at a good height. Okay, cool. We've got our balloon hung off of a handle now. I'm going to trim this end just so it doesn't get in the way of the other yarn. Then I'm going to take my bottle of glue here. I've used about half of it. I'm just going to dump the other half of this into the bowl. So that'll be about 2 ounces of glue, since this is a bowl of glue. So now we can get started. So I'll take my bowl of glue here and one of my pieces of yarn, dunk it in my bowl, and then just use the fork to stir it around. Make sure that it gets well coated with the glue. And when it looks like all of the bits are nice and gluey, we'll use the fork to pull it out as well. This is a messy craft. Let's find an end here. Here's one end of my gluey piece of yarn. So I'm just going to stick this between the tines of the fork and drag it through . So that gets all of the extra glue off. Big old drop of glue dropping off the fork. So that way it's not too gluey, so you don't have a bunch of extra glue drying off of the sides of it afterwards. There's just enough on there to stick it. And then you can start wherever. I think it's easiest to start just near the top of the balloon here. And then just bring it around however you like. can see I have the spot where I started there and the spot where I ended here. As I go around, I'll try to cross over those same spots with additional yarn strands, just so they're not hanging out on their own there. So that's one strand down, 19 or so to go. Just going of our yarn and around. It's a little up, it's from strand glue. You might have to untie the loops there. This is why you'll want to do a lot of shorter strands over here, as opposed to what strands that are straight long. So all those in one piece of yarn. As we're just and obviously you want to go, as you go around, make sure that you're sticking it to the balloon, but especially where they cross over other points of yarn, I want to make sure to stick it really well there. Okay, so if we had, instead of 20 36-inch pieces of yarn, if that was one big piece of yarn, 720 inches, you would have a very big problem with your yarn knotting together in the glue, because one long strand like that has a lot of opportunities to make weird little loops and knots. Okay, as you can see, I have a number of pieces of yarn left here, maybe 5 or so, but I think that I'm satisfied with the amount of coverage that I have here. As I was going, I was looking, as I placed my next thread, are there any big spots that I want to try to hit as I bring this one around, and I don't have any really big spots left exposed here. Obviously there's some bigger spots than other spots, but that's what you want, sort of, is a variation in the size of the holes between the threads here. So I will call this done. As you can see, my hands are very gluey. My bowl and my fork are very gluey, so cleanup is necessary after this. But for this guy here, it's possible that it could drip some glue. Since you run the yarn through the fork, it's not super drippy, but if the only place you have to hang something is above something that you don't want to have glue possibly drip on, you can put some newspaper, parchment paper, foil, something like that underneath, just to catch any possible glue drips. I have not had it happen before. But this will hang out here overnight, and then tomorrow we'll check on it. It should be all dry, and we can get the balloon out of there and have our yarn decor left. It is now tomorrow. My glue is all dried here. I've cut it off with my microwave, as you can see. So it's time to detach the balloon from the project. So you want to just press all the way around to get the balloon away from the yarn. Okay, I think I've gotten everything all detached from the balloon here. That took me about 5 minutes, but you want to be as thorough as possible with this step, because if there is any of it that is still stuck to the balloon, when we pop the balloon and it deflates, it can pull that part of the yarn in with it, which ruins your shape a little bit. But there were definitely a couple spots that didn't want to unstick at first, so I just moved on to another section, and then at the end I came back to those spots, and some of them were a little more willing to unstick at that point, And sometimes it helps if you can follow that thread along to a point where you've already unstuck it, and then you can sort of go underneath it up to the point where it's still sticky to help it out a little. So now that it is detached, we're just gonna cut the balloon right here near the knot. That way we don't have to give it a loud pop. We'll just gently let out the air. You can see that I missed one spot there that's pulling in a little. Just grab it. And another one here. And a couple on the back here that are falling in as well. It's definitely tricky to get all of them just because it can be so hard to tell if it's a spot you've already been to or not when you're just moving around a round object. But we have our balloon deflated in the center here. So now we can just squoosh it out. Okay. Here is our yarn ball. You can see that I have some spots here where there's some extra glue dangling. That could be from my fingers. I mean, I got a lot of glue on my fingers while I was putting it together. Or it could be that that's a spot that there was just some extra glue on that strand of yarn that I didn't manage to get off with the fork. So I can just go through and pick off those extra pieces so they're not just hanging out. Some tweezers could probably help out here with just snagging these little bits. But I've at least gotten those big patches of glue unstuck here. And I can perfect it a little later. You'll also see that there's a few strands that are a little dangly. You could either put a spot of glue just on that strand and glue it to its neighbor, or that could be the bottom if you're setting it down somewhere, or you could just snip it a little shorter up to the next point that it's more securely connected. So this is sort of the basic deal here, but you can definitely have some variations. Size is a pretty obvious one here, depending on the kind of balloon you get, how big you blow it up. The larger you blow up the balloon, the rounder it's going to turn out being, just because the more you fill up a balloon, the more uniform the shape is. The smaller you blow it up, it's going to be a little more ovular, just because of the way balloons are. Also, you can change the color, of course. I have here a yellow one and a pink one. And you could use yarn of more than one color in the same one if you wanted to, right? Just cut like 10 strips of yellow yarn and 10 strips of blue yarn and sort of mix them up on there. One thing you can do here, depending on, right, the number of strands that you use is going to make a big difference in how it looks when it's done. So if you use a lot more strands, you're going to have, you know, a more dense pattern here. If you have one like this that has a lot of open space, you could take a little tea light, maybe, yes, and stick it in the middle there. Obviously do not use a real candle in this, please. This is yarn and glue. It will catch on fire if you put fire inside of it. But you can put a little tea light in there. I saw some folks who made a bunch of little ones and attached each one to one light and some string lights. You can also, let me see if I can get my tea light out now. There we go. You could hang this up instead of setting it down on the table. You could just use some fishing line to hang it from the ceiling or something like that. Or if you had a smaller one and you wanted to hang it on a tree, you could put a little ornament hook on there. The version of this I originally saw was a pumpkin. So you can just put in some pipe cleaners. a little stem and some little leaves on there. Or as the package I bought calls them, fuzzy sticks. And then I also saw a couple where they had a centerpiece with just like, I assume it was an artificial flower on the top, or one where they used white yarn, or it might have been string instead. And then they put a little black plastic spider on there, so it's like a spider with a spider egg. So you have a lot of variations that you can play with these. So if you tried this craft and you're now wondering, what do I do with the rest of this yarn that I have now? The library has a lot of resources to help with that. Both physical books and ebooks. If you're not interested in the traditional uses of yarn, there's at least one book I came across called Knitless, 50 No Knit Stash Busting Yarn Projects by Laura McFadden. So that'll give you some ways to use up the rest of your yarn that's not like knit or crochet. There's also, I think, 4 books on finger and arm knitting. So you don't use needles for that, you're just moving the yarn between your arms or your fingers for the little projects. And then of course there's approximately a billion books and magazines on knit and crochet, including this one, One Skein by Lee Radford. So this will just give you smaller projects that just use one skein of yarn, so you won't have to go out and buy, you know, another one or however many to finish like a sweater. So I hope you try this craft. I think it's a lot of fun. It's definitely a little messy, but I like playing around with glue, and I think that like pressing it away from the balloon is also very satisfying. So I hope you give it a try some of the variations you can do on it. I like this little pumpkin personally, but I also like tiny little things that you can hang from the ceiling. You know, lots of options. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.